Thank you so much. Well, my name is Inger Berling-Heims. I am from Roskilde University Library, and I'm attending online here today with my colleague, Pernille Naylor. And first of all, I'd just like all of you to say thank you for welcoming us to this forum. I know that it's the first time that Pernille and I are participating in ERUA activities. So we're very excited about being here with all of you. At the very first, I would like to just show you where Roskilde University Library is so that you get a feeling of where we are in the world. And Pernille is controlling the slides, so I'm hoping that we're in good correspondence here. It's perfect. RUC and Roskilde University Library is located 30 kilometers outside of Copenhagen, Copenhagen obviously being the capital of Denmark. That also means that we have quite a number of our students that live in Copenhagen and then commute to RUC for their lessons and for their library services. And that does have an impact on how we run our library and what services we have to have available. And not just because of the pandemic, but obviously also because of the pandemic. In the latter years, we've had a heightened awareness of digital resources because and online meetings, because it helps facilitate this commute sometimes, or that students don't have to actually commute all the way to RUC to receive a library class or collect a book. Yeah, and the next slide, please. So a little bit about us. Roskilde University Library was founded in 1971, and that's actually a year before RUC formally opened in 1972, probably, as you all know, as a reform university and a sort of a counter to the pedagogic models that, especially in the Copenhagen University. In the beginning, the library was scattered in different buildings all over the campus. But in 2001, we got a beautiful new library building designed by the prestigious Danish architect Henning Larsen. So today, the library building still forms the framework around what is a really vibrant study environment. And unlike a lot of other libraries, almost the entirety of our library space is dedicated to group work. So we don't hush students. They're allowed to talk. They're allowed to even eat in the library space. And they're also allowed in the library space when we've all gone home for the day. So our information desk at the library is open from 9 till 3. But as a student or a researcher, or if you're just a private loaner with a card, an access card, you can get a code. And then you can access the library from 8 till midnight every single day of the week. Including some holidays. And in the beginning, we've done this since 2013, I believe. And in the beginning, there was a lot of concern about how this would affect the library space. Would it be ruined? Would it be vandalized? Would students have parties inside the library? Would they steal all of our books? But I'm happy to inform that neither of those fears actually turned out to be grounded in reality. And we have a body of students and researchers who take excellent care of our library, and we have virtually no problems with running an open library like this. And it's not because we keep everything away from the students. We have 11,000 shelf meters of books in open shelves at all times, which is quite a lot compared to that other research libraries in Denmark tend to have the majority of their collection not in open shelves, but on demand. But we feel that because RUC is an a university library that is away from where the students are. A lot of the time it's important that the students don't have to order a book so that they can collect it the next day, but when they are at the library, we can get them the book that they want if it's in our collection. And then another very important change in our history happened last fall. Since October 2021, we became a part of the Royal Danish Library rather than a part of RUC. And whereas we say that this shouldn't impact our services, it has, of course, impacted the way that we work. And it means that for us as a library, we now have two organizations that we try to sort of bridge in our work. We work up against the Royal Danish Library and RUC and try to support the agendas of both organizations. Yeah. Next slide, please. And this slide here, we brought with us just to give you a flair of the University Library in Roskilde. The numbers are mainly from September last year. So the pandemic was sort of in check. We were open, but perhaps still marked a little bit by the pandemic. But in September 2021, we had 12,000 visitors during the month, which is quite good or normal for us. Of course, visiting numbers plummeted during the pandemic, but they did rise quite quickly again when the university opened. We have seen over the past decade that there has been a doubling in the length of visit that users have. Back in 2010, the average length of visit was around 40 minutes, and now it's around 80 minutes. And we take that to mean that the library space is increasingly being used as a study space and not simply a place to go and get a book. So typically, students stay in the library for a relatively long time between classes or as their main study environment. We also have quite a large teaching portfolio. In September last fall, we taught just over 1,000 students in that month. And I will say that that's not a very representative month, though it is our busiest month because that's where we teach all of the big bachelor entry classes. And then we have a supplementary course or service where you can book a librarian, and that goes for both researchers and students, where they book a librarian for an hour's meeting, and we help guide them with anything from literature search or data management or reference management or whatever it is, and it's particular guidance for that's close to their project. Yeah. And the project work is obviously really, really important at RUC. I know that this is something that is common for the reform universities, but RUC students spend 50% of their studies in participant-driven projects. And at RUC, we call that pedagogic model for, we call it PPL. It stands for problem-oriented project learning. And the project groups, they design and they carry out projects independently, but of course with supervision, but frequently outside of their supervisors' core expertise, because they elect their own projects, we can't absolutely guarantee that they're exactly within the middle of supervisors' areas of expertise. And that, of course, puts really, really high demands on the levels of information competencies that RUC students have to have from the very first semester of their studies at RUC. And that's why we aim to reach students several times during their studies, but most importantly, in their first semester. And we have different models, but we work with everything from 1 hour introduction classes to 3.5 hour workshop-based teaching, where students get a chance to really work with our resources and work closely with how to find literature for their own projects. And I will say that we tend, or we want to move towards the workshop-based teaching as much as possible, because that is where we really feel that we can make a difference for the students. And once they've had a chance to work with it and not just hear someone talk about literature search, they really they start getting on board, and that is extremely important for trying to compete with the widespread Googleitis that I think RUC students also suffer from. And then, as a supplement, we have the Book a Librarian service that I talked about before. Then to say a little bit about open educational resources, we don't have a very high focus on open educational resources, but we do some things. We have a platform that we call LibGuides. I'm sure that maybe some of you know the LibGuides system already. And all of our LibGuides are completely openly and publicly available. And because Danish is a relatively small language area, all of our LibGuides we strive to have in English as well, to support international students at RUC, international researchers. We make short educational videos that are also publicly available on the portal video.ruc.dk. And then we've collaborated with a RUC spin-off that's called Third Room. And Third Room is sort of a social network for RUC students and researchers that I think they dream of expanding to all Danish universities, and hopefully even beyond national borders. And it's a tool that gives the students an opportunity to make a library of projects where they can showcase their projects in a relatively visual way via a timeline like the one that you can see on the slide. And then they can both show their project, but they can also interact with other students or other advisors, researchers, or even just interested third parties. At the moment, Third Room works by invitation, but they do give invitations to people who are curious. So I'd encourage to maybe just go to the site and ask for an invite if you're curious, or contact us, of course. This is not exactly necessarily open educational resources, but I put it in here as well because I think it's really important to say that all research that is conducted by RUC researchers is registered in a system, in the Pure system. So we have a research portal where you can look up every single bit of research activity conducted at RUC. And then you can find specific researchers, like I've took the liberty to showcase Lone Simonsen, who was one of our prominent researchers and leader of the pandemics center. You can go in, you can see their publications, and whenever there's a publication that's published open access, then you can also access it. And the pure research registration is closely linked to our work with open access, which we shall return to. But first, I think Pernille would like to say something about open research and data management in general at RUC.
Thank you so much for that, Inga. I don't know, can everyone hear me? Can you hear me, Inga? Okay, good.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so moving on to open science more specifically, Roskilde University set up an open science working group in 2020 to address how open science initiatives can be coordinated at the university in the future. So this has only been done recently. Their vision paper is based on RUC's strategy called 2030 Interconnected, which is the one you see here on the screen, as well as the European Commission's open science themes as described in the report, Open Science and its Role in Universities, a Roadmap for Cultural Change by the League of European Research Universities. So currently at Roskilde University, we focus on the areas you can see over here. So citizen science, responsible metrics, rewards and incentives, alternative metrics, next generation metrics, whatever you want to call them, and then fair data and open access, sorry. So these are basically the reason why the university has opted for these 4 themes is because they align with the university's aim to be quote unquote, an open network of knowledge in which involvement and knowledge sharing are seen as a prerequisite for free thought, democracy, equality, tolerance, and sustainability. So that's kind of, this is my way of sort of summing up, you know, a vision paper that's quite long. So you know, bear with me. Basically, we are in different stages in the development of each of the 4 topics. So starting off with citizen science, just to tell you a bit about that. It is very much a work in progress at the moment, but Roskilde University has defined citizen science in broad terms and in line with the EU citizen science definition. And basically, you know, in the vision paper from 2020, it reads that citizen science is defined as citizens contributing with knowledge and or labor, as well as other methods of involvement, including participatory research and collaborative research. So that's a very sort of broad take on the topic, on the term. At Roskilde University Library, we are still in the early stages of working with and implementing this theme in our research support services. We are going to hire an open science program manager at the library who'll be working in collaboration with the university on this topic. But one way in which the library is going to contribute is by hosting an annual conference and offering physical space for other citizen science initiatives and events. Another way is to offer support and guidance to individual researchers when handling citizen science data. So one specific example of how we've offered support to researchers is Christian Subert's The Mass Experiment, which I'm hoping you can see that on the screen now. The Mass Experiment is a citizen science project which relies on collaboration with students from all across the country, so Denmark, to map plastic pollution in the country, sort of on a national scale. And our supporting role as the library was to help publish Subert's research data in the online repository Synodo, which you hopefully also can see on the screen. And that's to make sure that the data from the project is available to other researchers as well as the public more generally. So to make sure, in other words, that there's open access to the data whilst obviously following legal requirements and ethical guidelines and so on. So I'm hoping that I can share the sound in this video now. It's a short introductory video, which will sort of show us how Suba approached the topic and just explain it is in Danish, but the subtitles are in English. So, you know, you should be able to follow.
Hvis vi får en viden omkring, hvor meget plastik der er rundt omkring i naturen, så kan vi efterfølgende bruge det som samfund til at reagere på det og finde ud af, hvordan vi mindsker forureningen. Jeg hedder Christian Syberg. Jeg er lektor på Roskilde Universitet, Institut for Naturvidenskab og Miljø, og talsmand for Marine Plastic. I dag der er jeg ude på en skole i Dragør, fordi at der er nogle af skoleklasserne herude, som er ude at samle plastikaffald ind i naturen. Og det gør de som en del af vores store masseeksperiment, som vi laver sammen med Astra her i år. Og formålet med det her masseeksperiment, det er, at børn og unge de samler plastikaffald ind efter en metode, som vi har udviklet i samarbejde med det europæiske miljøagentur. Og når de har samlet alle de her data ind, alle de her plastaffald ind, så bliver det tastet ind i en stor database. Og den her database, den får vi så til rådighed. Og så kan vi med udgangspunkt i den lave det her landkort over, hvor meget plastikaffald der rent faktisk er rundt omkring i Danmark. Og der er en lang række videnskabelige hypoteser, hvis jeg kan teste med baggrund af de her data. Så det bliver utrolig spændende at få de her data ind. Altså man kan sige, at det her masseeksperiment, det handler jo ikke udelukkende om, at børnene de skal blive klogere på plastikforurening og på naturvidenskab. For os, som grunden til, at vi går ind i det med marine plastic, det er jo, at vi får et unikt datasæt ud af det her. Det er jo sådan, at der er 57.000 børn og unge med i det her, og det vil jo være umuligt for os at indsamle så stort et datamateriale, hvis vi ikke fik hjælp fra dem. Bare forestil jer, hvor meget det ville tage, hvis vi skulle have videnskabelige assistenter til at lave det her arbejde. Det vil selvfølgelig selv sagt være helt umuligt. Så vi får det her ret unikke datasæt, og det bliver det første datasæt i verden, hvor vi får sådan en helt national kortlægning. Så jeg har meget store forventninger til den videnskab, vi får ud af det i sidste ende.
Right, so hopefully you could all hear that / read the subtitles. So that's a specific example of how we're working with citizen science at the moment. Moving on to the topic of metrics, just to say that for us at Roskilde University, responsible metrics or next generation metrics is again very much a work in progress. And to be honest, it's still a bit of a black box for us. The library is going to work with the university to establish the kinds of metrics that suit the university's DNA. So that is looking for metrics that can help acknowledge researchers' publications as well as their other research outputs. So, you know, it's important to recognize that researchers do more than just publish their work in the form of monographs and articles. So hopefully this is something, you know, we'll figure out in the near future. So on that note, I'm going to move on to fair data or research data management. So our policy on research data management at the University of Roskilde is in line with Denmark's national strategy for data management, in which this is based on the FAIR principles, and that's why, you know, fair data has a prominent role in the vision paper I mentioned earlier. So in this national strategy, the overall vision for research data management is that, quote, researchers continuously make qualified decisions and actions in relation to the maintenance of and access to their data and any other results such as software, protocols or the like, with due consideration for the promotion of research, the needs of society and the existing legislation. And the objective is to, quote, make data as open as possible in accordance with the FAIR principles so that data can be accessed and reused by others to the greatest possible extent. So this is sort of what we're working from. This is sort of the starting point. I know that some of the earlier presenters have already talked a bit about FAIR. I'm going to talk about, at the risk of repetition, I'm going to try and sort of do my best to focus on how we interpret that at our university, at Roskilde University. So the basic idea of FAIR data is that research data in the future should be able to be found, accessed, and as far as possible, reused, and that the conditions for the use of research data are clearly formulated. In other words, that research data follow the FAIR principles in that they are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And it's really important for us at Roskilde University to say that FAIR data does not mean open data, as there may be good reasons why research data cannot be made openly available. For instance, in the case of sensitive data. In many cases, however, research data can still be made fair if the researcher publishes metadata describing the data set, as well as the conditions in which others may be able to access research data, or at least, to the extent that they know it exists. So what does it mean to create FAIR data in practice at Roskilde University? For us, the policy is that at Roskilde University, the policy on research data management is that research data as a minimum should meet the requirements of findable. For us, at the library and at the university, this means to publish searchable metadata. So assign persistent identifiers, use keywords, and so on. So this will help make sure that, other people can find it. Even though we focus on, or we say that research data as a minimum should meet the requirements of findable, we also work with the other principles. This is how we work with accessible. So for instance, we suggest to publish data or metadata in a data repository such as Zenodo. And this means that metadata are open even if the data set is restricted. Interoperable. It's important that metadata and data are understandable to humans and machines, so to use open file formats. And lastly, that research is reusable, so data is reusable, sorry. So for instance, to add a usage license to clarify the ways in which this data can or cannot be reused. So even though we focus on findable, researchers at the university are also working to meet the other criteria. So the mass experiment I introduced before meets all of the criteria of FAIR. DOI and keywords, make sure it's findable. The data set is listed in Zenodo, open access, so it's accessible. The data set and not just the metadata. And it's made available in a format that's listed as acceptable by OpenAIRE. And then finally, the license is explained to clarify how other researchers can reuse it. So just to sort of elaborate a bit on the importance of FAIR data for us at Roskilde University. FAIR data for us makes the research process more transparent and facilitates reproducibility of results wherever possible. And I think, it's very much in the university's culture to collaborate across disciplines and share knowledge. And a more democratic sharing of research data can help solve some of the major societal challenges as well, as seen in recent examples of research conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic. But FAIR data can also help promote research at Roskilde University, creating visibility for both the university and the individual researchers. and as such provide opportunities for new collaborations in interdisciplinary terms, but also nationally and internationally. So you know, for us, it's very important that we work on implementing this initiative. And you know, I just want to conclude by saying a bit about the library's contribution and some of the different initiatives that we're working on to offer research support at Roskilde University. We are collaborating with the university's IT department, establishing an online front office, is what we call it, at the university, where researchers can seek help and guidance for research data management and fair data and so on and so forth. At the library itself, we also have a data management competence center, which we're currently developing. This is to support and advise researchers and students for the entire duration of the research life cycle. And we wish to offer courses for departments and research groups, but we also already have mandatory courses. So the workshops that Inga was talking about earlier for PhD students in place, so that they're specifically on data management, how to create a data management plan, and so on and so forth. So we, the library, work closely with the IT department, the unit of academic development, and the research support office at the university on this initiative. And then here it is. So to implement the use of data management plans and have this sort of culture shift, we provide support for data management plans via DMP online. There's a Danish version of that available on the internet. And then we're also working on specific guidelines for Roskilde University's researchers, and these are on the way. And then finally, the library supports the researchers to make the metadata about their research data visible at the research portal of Roskilde University, which Inga mentioned earlier, so Pure. The research portal is a way for the university, but also for individual researchers to brand themselves as following the open science agenda, which is, we've already recognized today that, you know, it is important, but also to promote all of their work on a single online platform. So rather than their data sets or metadata being spread across the web in different repositories, depending on the topic or whatever, you know, this is one single platform where they can showcase all of their work. Right, and on that note, I'm going to hand the mic back to Inga, who's going to talk a bit about open access.
Yes, thank you so much, Pernille. So, yeah, RUC, like all other Danish universities, have a green open access strategy. And that is to say that there's actually a national open access strategy in Denmark that was put in place in 2014 by Sofie Carsten Nielsen, who was the then Minister for Education and Research. She's the smiling lady in the corner there. And the green open access strategy in Denmark is motivated by the need to keep public expenses for scientific publishing at a reasonable level, and to not grow considerably as a result of an open access strategy. And RUC was actually an early mover with regards to open access, and already in 2008, free access to research materials, not per se open access, but free access to research materials is mentioned in RUC's digital strategy. And from approximately 2010, Roskilde University Library has worked actively with open access on RUC publications. So, a little bit about the national strategy. The vision for the national strategy is, and I quote, to create free access for all citizens, researchers, and companies to all research articles from Danish research institutions financed by public authorities and or private foundations. End of quote. So RUC follows the national strategy without any special or additional goals. But it is important, as I mentioned just before, that we follow this ideology that open access should not result in an increased publishing expenditure. So following this, it's an explicit part of RUC's publishing policy that RUC does not cover costs that are related to publishing in gold or hybrid OA. And that means that we don't have a pot of OA funds that could cover costs for gold or hybrid OA. And if a researcher wants to pursue other types of OA, then they need to find that funding elsewhere. And in turn, this means that our focus for realizing the OA targets is on giving access to unblocked publications. And the work then to unblock more publications lies with national license negotiations that are conducted as a whole for Denmark in the Danish Royal Library. And the national targets for the open access strategy is quite ambitiously that, and I quote again, from 2025 onwards, there should be unimpeded digital access for all, to all peer-reviewed scientific articles from Danish research institutions with a maximum 12-month embargo. And so if we take a look at how the work on those ambitious OA targets is going, then the realization of the Danish open access strategy is monitored nationally via the open access indicator that, if you're interested, you can all find at oaindicator.dk. And there's an English version of the website as well. And at the moment, the collective number of OA articles is just around 20,000 or just below 20,000. And RUC has provided around 15% of those, which is not too bad when you consider that RUC is actually a quite small university compared to other universities in Denmark. And RUC in this graph here is the burgundy line sort of in the middle. And that means that at the moment we're performing right around sort of the middle field of Danish universities. But you can also see that we're a bit short of the expectations for the 2022 target that are represented by the dotted line in the middle. You can also tell that this is a strategy, right? It's totally straight and just going forward. The strategy aims to secure open access for scientific articles, I should also say, is on articles, conference proceedings in journals, and proceedings that has an ISSN number. So excluded from this open access indicator is scientific monographs, anthology contributions, publications on patented discoveries, PhD and doctorate dissertations. So there's actually quite a lot of material that's not included in the open access indicator. Can we just go back a little bit? I've got a final bit to say. So the articles that has been published in OA is in a very large part published OA because of a systematic and diligent work carried out by one colleague. We have one person in the library, and it's neither Pernille nor me doing all of this work. But she manually contacts all relevant researchers as part of the research registration. And you can also maybe see that if you follow the burgundy line back to the beginning of the graph in 2015, we were almost at the top of the field. And that is because of Roskilde University Library's very early work with open access. So it is us at the library who are responsible for contacting researchers, retrieving preferably post-print manuscripts, and thereby it's the library that is the main driver for RUC's OA fulfillment. And at the moment, you can also see that there is a slowdown, like the lines don't continue to rise for all universities. There is a slowdown of the realization of OA. And that's in part because of long embargo periods from the publishers on post-prints or accepted manuscripts. And then it's also that in Denmark, our researchers have a publishing pattern where they publish in journals that does not allow that do not allow green open access, which is something that's particular for Danish or Scandinavian language journals that don't follow standards from large international publishers such as Elsevier or Taylor and Francis and Sage and the like. And now if we could get the last slide. So let's just have a closer look at RUC's OA fulfillment. And the green bar in the graph is the realized OA, and the red bar represents where green OA is simply not possible. And then if you would remember that we don't have funds for golden or hybrid OA. And then, so we work pretty exclusively with the yellow, which is the unrealized potential. And then you might ask, why do we not realize the full potential? And that's, of course, a complicated answer to that, or there's a complex answer to that. But all research activities at RUC are registered in the PURE system, as I mentioned earlier. And in connection with research registration, then we attempt to identify articles that would be eligible for green OA publishing. And then we contact the relevant researchers. And now, first of all, this is a manual process, so it's quite resource heavy. But then also the yellow, you could say that the yellow field represents where we contact the researchers. And once we've contacted the researchers, there are those who just simply don't wish to publish OA for whatever reason, but there are still some prejudice amongst some researchers. And then there are researchers whom we can't contact because they've ceased their activities at RUC. They could be guest researchers or postdocs who's moved on to other postdocs. And then there are, of course, also the researchers that just never answer that first email about how to get their article published OA. And I think that if you consider all of those reasons, then it's pretty amazing that the yellow bar isn't bigger than it is. And our policy is to just contact researchers once. And we don't pursue researchers who don't respond or researchers who have left RUC. And that is partly to respect researchers' time. We know that a lot of researchers are incredibly busy, and if they don't respond, then maybe it's because they don't have the time to deal with the with our email. And it is also in part because we don't have the resources that it would take to diligently follow up again and again and again and again until we had all in hand. So we also find that there is often sort of a relatively low degree of awareness from researchers about RUC's open access approach, and especially how we're dependent of them having a post-print or an accepted manuscript, and not just a publisher version available, because those are typically not eligible for Green OA. And they can be difficult to come by later in the publishing phase. And that is also a difficulty. But we're trying to solve this by communicating better, and I think that we believe that this is maybe also where we can learn from each other's practices around open access. Thank you, Pernille. I think you can take over.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's basically everything we have. I think, are we on time? I think we are on time. So like Inga said before, we at Roskilde University Library, we work on different topics. So just to, if you do have any follow-up questions, any queries, anything that pops up after this staff exchange week, you know, you can contact us here. And like I said, the metrics area is still very much a work in progress, and we're currently hiring someone to cover that area, and the same with sort of the overall open science coordinator. But for now, these are the people you can get in touch with. So Inga and myself, and also Sasha and Cesar, each of whom work with data management and open access. So I think on that note, that's it. That's everything from us. Thank you very much for listening.